fairly complete game. How were the Eagles able to dominate New York last night, Steve?
Especially listening to Carson Wentz, he let us know they struggled as far as scoring points early. They hadn't been putting many points on the board in the first quarter. So now looking at that, how does the defense create turnovers? So it became a team effort. The offense is able to get points. Defense creates another turnover. They get more points going against a team that they're very familiar with, who they believe that last week against Carolina, that's not their offense. That's not the type of team that they are. Even with those 2 touchdowns early, I believe it really relieved a lot from what the Philadelphia wanted to do. Mission accomplished. Let's be positive as far as getting the ball. And I think this started long before the game. I believe when Philadelphia got on the bus, they got on the bus with the type of grit that got them into a championship. Well, Chris, what makes you draw that conclusion? It started with me with Lane Johnson before the game, working out with the head coach, Doug Peterson, and the training staff. They're testing that ankle. He's got a high ankle sprain for a wide receiver and for an offensive lineman, especially a tackle, because he's setting and that ankle is hinging back. That's one of the worst injuries you can have for that position. So seeing him, and they kind of embraced after the workout. Now, he didn't look great. He was limping through it. The ankle was heavily taped. He got knocked out of the game earlier. But I believe that it sent an overall message as far as we are a team that's going to defend the Super Bowl championship. It starts with our big people, and you could see through him playing in the game. Jason Peters, the left tackle, gets knocked out of the game with the bicep. So I believe that effort of Lane Johnson and the overall grit that champions have, it played out in this game. And they actually were able to execute what they were doing. Score points, create turnovers, give the offense multiple possessions. And that's what I saw the world champs doing on Thursday Night Football, Nate.
It felt like for the first time all year, the world champs were back to being anything like they were last year. How did they become world champs last year? An excellent offensive line. Well, Carson Wentz was only sacked once last night. An outstanding pass rush and defensive line. They either sacked or hit Eli Manning 18 times last night. And one of the best third down teams we have seen in modern NFL history. Last night on third down, Carson Wentz, a tidy 13 of 14, a 156 rating, 2 touchdowns, 12 yards per pass.
Like the first 10 in a row.
10 in a row. Absolutely right. And which was a nice juxtaposition to the Giants' just total debacle for a couple weeks on third down, which we'll get to later. But they looked like the way they played when they won the Super Bowl, when they got to the Super Bowl. You said before the show, see, how about getting back to the RPOs?
Oh, yeah.
How about if it worked for Nick Foles, maybe it's going to work for our 6'5" stud franchise quarterback.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what they got back to. Alshon Jeffries making contested plays, running the different variations of the RPOs, sometimes motioning him in where he can run a stick route, other times leaving him out wide where he ran a slant route. But those were the things that we saw, especially in the NFC Championship with Nick Foles and this offense. Doug Peterson goes back to it. Nelson Aguilar making a couple huge catches there to be able to keep drives going.
The one play where Wentz got hit, Wentz gets hit on the arm. The ball still travels 16 yards past the line of scrimmage, and it looked like Landon Collins was waiting for it. And that could be a huge play because early in the game, the Giants were moving the ball. They had to settle for field goals. They looked like they might be able to overcome Eli's turnover and fumble. And that could have been a swing play of the game. I thought it was going to be. Joe Buck called it like he was anticipating a pick. And what did Nelson Aguilar do?
He converted. He cuts in front of the safety, prevent the turnover, keeps the offense going. And also, you know, guys like Jordan Matthews coming in, getting 2 critical third down conversions. We saw the quarterback being supported by very good play calling and other guys making plays. We knew they were struggling with running back with their injuries, but they still got these guys the football so the offensive line could roll off on that Giants D.
Before the game, we talked about whether the weather would slow down the pace or slow down their offense or just sort of, shorten it a little bit. It didn't look like the Eagles were affected by that at all.
That's the reason why you have someone like Carson Wentz. You got a guy 6'5", 230 pounds. He can throw the ball through the wind. Like the rain, it was going to be a part of the ball game, but That's why you have a big stud quarterback. That's why in Philadelphia, man, as the season progresses, you're not worried about the weather in October, November, and December on the East Coast because you got a guy that weather is not going to make that much of a difference.
And that it's not foreign to him. Like your thing running, I don't want to say joke, but running commentary about Rosen and Darnold is both of them grew up in cities with beach attached to the name. Both of them went to Southern California colleges. Where did Carson Wentz go to college? North Dakota State. I'm not quite certain what city that's in, but if it's in North Dakota, the weather ain't great.
Yeah, they do have a nice dome up there. They do play in.
And so, do they practice in the dome as well?
I'm just sure, but you're living in it.
Okay, fair enough. You're living in it. It's awful weather. They have a dome stadium in North Dakota State. Good for them, man. I had no idea. Learn something new every day. But you don't think the weather in general adversely affects him the way it would potentially other quarterbacks. It's one of the reasons why he's a good fit there. And even if I'm skeptical of a guy like Josh Allen playing at Wyoming, where they better not have a dome at Wyoming. We're at Wyoming going up to Buffalo. And so, like, that didn't play a huge factor in the game. To me, what played a huge factor in the game was the Eagles looked like themselves. This was, to me, similar.
Themselves of last season.
Yes.
Clearly not the themselves of this season.
You know what?
They played up to their ability.
Now,
you can talk about last year whether they played up to their ability, and the Giants, it's not that the Giants aren't that talented. That's what it really amounts to me. So I was getting ready to say, well, the Giants played up to their lack of ability, and I'm sure we're going to break that down later.
But was it enough to turn the season around? Did the Eagles play well enough that you could say, okay, this is where they made the turn?
Well, that will be determined in the next 2 weeks because they have two really good teams, Carolina and Jacksonville, coming up. But what I'll tell you it reminded me of was that Pats-Dolphins game a couple weeks ago, where we said, okay, now, if the Pats lose this game, it's time to actually worry. And what did the Pats do? They put together their most dominant, complete game of the year up to this point. We said yesterday that while the Giants' season was on the line, for me, taking the Eagles seriously as a championship contender was on the line. And they played a dominant game for full 60 minutes.
Yeah, these are teams that have been playing each other over 80 years. Jenna, you talked yesterday about the last several meetings, how tight the matchups were. So we thought it was going to be a back and forth, a field goal at the end. That's a typical Giants-Eagles game. But, man, the Eagles handed it to the Giants. So now, is it enough? Because we were posing the question yesterday, this could go either way. I thought the Giants would I thought the Eagles would be able to handle the Giants. So, yes, after a blowout win, the divisional on a Thursday night, yes, the Eagles are back on track.
By kickoff, this was a 1.5-point spread in Vegas. The Eagles were as small of favorites as you possibly can be, and they absolutely, every phase of the game, offense, defense, special teams, dominated the New York Giants. They looked like the class of the NFC East, which I think is the heart of your question. Like, can they now power past Dallas and Washington? And the Giants look like a team with no answers, just a bunch of bad questions.
At the end of the day, both teams showed who they really were and what direction both of them are going in. All right, got to take a break. Coming up, might we be seeing an AFC Championship preview in Foxborough this weekend? Next on First Things First.
Wouldn't be